Hey everyone, ready for another deep dive? Today we're tackling something that's become a bit of a buzzword, inclusive design. But we're going deeper than just the hype. We're going to figure out what it really means, why it should matter to you, and how to tell if companies are actually walking the walk. We've got some really interesting research to help us out, stuff about consumer psychology, marketing strategies, even some insights from business school courses.
Yeah, it's a topic that's becoming more and more relevant every day. Inclusive design touches so many parts of our lives, like from the products we use to the messages brands are sending us.
Exactly. It's everywhere once you start noticing it. So to kick things off, how does our research actually define inclusive design?
Well, it says it's the actual or perceived match between the user and the design object.
Okay, break that down for me.
Basically, think about any time you use a product or service, right? There's this interaction going on between you and that design.
Got it.
The goal of inclusive design is to make sure that interaction is as smooth as possible for as many people as possible.
So it's about minimizing those moments where things feel clunky or awkward,
Yeah.
right? Like not just making things accessible for people with disabilities, but considering all the different ways people experience the world.
Yeah, exactly. It's about recognizing that one size fits all just doesn't cut it when it comes to design.
The research actually uses a really interesting example of this. You know, ill-fitting work gloves. Seems simple, but it really highlights how a mismatch between the user and the design can make something totally unusable.
Right. And that mismatch can happen in tons of different ways, not just with physical objects.
Okay, so we're talking about way more than just making ramps and accessible bathrooms then.
Way more. And to help designers wrap their heads around this whole spectrum of human diversity, there's a framework called addressing. It stands for age and generational differences, developmental and acquired disabilities, religion, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, sexual orientation, indigenous heritage, national origin, and gender. A lot to consider, right?
Wow, addressing. It's like a checklist for designers to make sure they're thinking about inclusivity from every angle. And speaking of design, the research actually mentions a few different approaches to it, right?
There are, yeah. You've got designer-centric, user-centric, and then there's user-led inclusive design.
What's the difference between those?
Well, designer-centric can sometimes put too much emphasis on the designer's artistic vision, and not enough on how people are actually going to use the product.
I see.
And while user-centric does involve the user, it can still be kind of static, like it doesn't always adapt well to changing needs.
Okay, so user-led inclusive design is where it's at then.
It seems to be the most effective approach. It really emphasizes empathy and collaboration with users throughout the whole design process.
So it's not just asking people what they want once and calling it a day. It's about continuously involving them and adapting as you go.
Precisely. It recognizes that the people actually using a product or service are the ultimate experts on their own experiences.
That makes so much sense. This reminds me of that example we talked about before the show. Scandinavian Airlines system getting fined for creating a separate website for disabled people. It felt like a classic case of missing the mark on inclusive design.
It totally was.
Yeah.
Instead of promoting true accessibility, it ended up reinforcing exclusion,
Exactly. Like, here's your separate special section over here.
It highlights how important it is to address those three key barriers to inclusive design that the research mentions.
Which are?
The physical, the social, and the attitudinal.
Okay, break this down for me.
So physical barriers are the most obvious, things like stairs that prevent someone in a wheelchair from accessing a building.
Right.
But then you've got social barriers, which can be a bit more subtle.
Like what?
Think about social norms or practices that exclude certain groups, maybe marketing campaigns that only feature one type of person, or a lack of diverse representation in decision-making positions, things like that. And then attitudinal barriers, well, those are all about people's beliefs and perceptions, stereotypes, prejudices, even just a lack of awareness about different needs and perspectives.
So dismantling all of these barriers is essential to creating truly inclusive designs.
Absolutely. And when we talk about why inclusive design matters, the research points to three core values: functionality, usability, and acceptance.
I'm curious, out of those three, which do you think resonates the most with the average person?
That's a good question. I mean, they're all connected, but I think acceptance might be the most powerful. Functionality just means that a product works. Usability means it's easy to use, but acceptance, that's about feeling seen and understood.
It's about feeling like a product was designed with you in mind, not just for some generic everyone.
Exactly. It's a much deeper connection.
I can definitely relate to that. There's something really validating about finding a product that just clicks with you on that level. And speaking of clicking, the research dives into this really interesting concept called the DARE framework. It's supposed to help us understand how people react to different levels of inclusivity in design. It stands for design, appraisal, response, and experience.
Oh, yeah, the DARE framework is a good one. Basically, it says that the design itself sends a signal about whether it's inclusive or exclusive.
Okay.
Then the consumer appraises the design, like, do I feel included or excluded by this? And that appraisal triggers an emotional response, which ultimately shapes the entire experience they have with the brand.
So it's not just about the product itself, it's about the whole feeling it evokes.
Exactly. Think about it. You see a new product, right?
Mm-hmm.
Instantly, your brain starts making judgments about whether it's for you or not. If you feel excluded, you might feel frustrated, disappointed, maybe even a little angry.
Right.
But if you feel included, well, then you're more likely to feel joy, excitement, a sense of belonging.
And those emotions, they stick with us, right? They influence whether we buy the product, tell our friends about it, even how we interact with the brand online.
Absolutely. The DARE framework is a really useful way to understand why some brands just nail inclusivity while others completely miss the mark.
So speaking of different levels of inclusivity, the research actually outlines 3 distinct levels, right?
Mhm.
Each one with its own unique consumer appraisal and emotional response. Tell me more about that. The first level, permitting access, sounds kind of basic, like the bare minimum.
Yeah, you could say that. It's about meeting those basic accessibility requirements, but not necessarily going above and beyond, you know?
So like adding ramps to buildings or offering basic accessibility features on a website.
Right. It's progress for sure, but it doesn't always feel genuine.
Like, okay, you're finally letting me in, but I still don't feel entirely welcome. What about level 2 then?
Level 2 is engaged participation. This is where brands are making a more conscious effort to be inclusive, to promote equity. Think about things like video games that feature diverse characters or beauty brands that offer a wider range of foundation shades.
So it's about actively trying to represent and include a broader range of people.
Exactly. And at this level, consumers are more likely to feel seen and heard. The appraisal here is much more positive. It feels like the brand is doing the right thing.
It's progress, for sure, but it sounds like there's still another level to reach.
There is. Level 3, empowered success. This is where things get really interesting.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What does level 3 look like in practice?
Well, this is where inclusive design leads to truly seamless integration, where it creates a sense of flow for the user, regardless of their abilities or background.
So it's not just about making things accessible, it's about making them work beautifully for everyone.
Exactly. Think about OXO Good Grips kitchen tools, you know? They were originally designed to be easy to use for people with arthritis, but they're loved by everyone.
Well, yeah, those are great. I have a few of those myself.
Or Nike Fly sneakers. They were initially designed for a student with cerebral palsy, but now they're a mainstream style known for their accessibility and functionality.
I see what you mean. It's like these products weren't designed with a specific limitation in mind. They were designed with everyone in mind.
Precisely. And at this level, the consumer appraisal is something like, this is how the world should be.
It's that feeling of, wow, this was made for me, even though I never realized I needed it.
Exactly. The emotional response is incredibly positive elation, gratitude, a sense of personal agency. It's about feeling empowered and valued.
That's powerful stuff.
Yeah.
It seems like inclusive design can really elevate a brand and create a much deeper connection with its audience.
It absolutely can. And this brings us to the realm of inclusive marketing, which goes beyond just product design to encompass advertising, communications, the whole brand experience.
So we're talking about representation in advertising, challenging stereotypes, making a genuine effort to engage with diverse communities.
All of that. We're seeing more and more examples of this every day, from showcasing women in traditionally male-dominated roles to portraying people with disabilities as capable and independent.
These representations matter, don't they? They shape how we see ourselves and others.
They really do. But of course, we can't talk about inclusive marketing without mentioning the flip side, woke washing.
Ugh, yes, woke washing. It's when brands jump on the social justice bandwagon just for profit without actually being committed to the cause.
Right. It's all about appearances, not genuine action.
And consumers are savvy. They can usually spot that kind of inauthenticity from a mile away.
I remember that Nike Colin Kaepernick campaign. Some people saw it as controversial, but to me, it felt like a genuine expression of the brand's values.
It sparked a lot of conversation for sure, and some people even boycotted Nike, but ultimately it felt like a powerful example of a brand taking a stand.
It really showed how brands can successfully navigate sensitive topics when they're truly committed to the cause.
Exactly. It's about walking the walk, not just talking the talk. Okay, so let's shift gears a bit because I want to talk about this really thought-provoking case study that puts all these concepts into practice. We're going to dive into the world of nonprofit marketing with the King of Beasts example.
This is a great one. It presents two opposing campaigns, one advocating for a ban on trophy hunting of lions, and the other actually promoting it as a conservation tool.
Wait, promoting trophy hunting as conservation? That seems counterintuitive.
It does, right. But before we jump to any conclusions, it's crucial to remember that we're not here to advocate for either side.
Right, we're just analyzing how each side might approach its campaign from a marketing perspective.
Exactly. It's a fascinating exercise in applying marketing principles to a complex, emotionally charged issue.
Okay, I'm ready to get into it. I'm already curious about how each side would try to persuade their audience.
Me too. So in the next part of our deep dive, we'll unpack these campaigns and see what insights we can uncover.
Welcome back. That King of Beasts case study we were talking about, it's really got me thinking, trying to put myself in those marketers' shoes on opposite sides of such a loaded issue, it's tough.
Yeah, it's a real challenge for sure. But that's what makes it such a valuable exercise, It forces us to think about marketing's power, not just for selling products, but for actually shaping people's opinions and driving real action in the world.
So let's unpack these campaigns, shall we? First up, the one advocating for a ban on trophy hunting lions. Where do they even begin?
Well, just like with any marketing effort, they need to start by understanding their target audience. Who are they trying to reach with this message?
I imagine it would be the general public, right? Trying to raise awareness about the issue and maybe even evoke some empathy for lions.
Yeah, definitely. But they'd probably also target animal welfare groups, those who already align with their mission, and maybe even try to influence policymakers, either directly or indirectly, to push for policy changes.
It seems like the approach would have to be different depending on who they're talking to, right?
Absolutely. For the general public, they might lean heavily on emotional appeals, Think heart-wrenching images of lions being hunted, powerful stories about the bond between a mother lion and her cubs, maybe even some celebrity endorsements from well-known animal advocates.
Seems like social media would be a huge asset for them too, wouldn't it? Like a video going viral, capturing the beauty of lions in their natural habitat, and then contrasting that with the brutality of trophy hunting.
Yeah, social media is perfect for that, spreading messages quickly and widely. They could use emotive hashtags, encourage sharing, really try to tap into that viral potential. And don't forget about paid advertising. They could target their ads to appear on websites that animal lovers frequent, or even during nature documentaries.
So many possibilities. It sounds like their messaging would have to be super strategic too, right? What kind of objectives would they be trying to achieve with this campaign?
Well, it could be something as broad as just raising awareness and shifting public opinion about trophy hunting in general. Or they might aim to drive more concrete actions like getting people to sign petitions, donating to conservation organizations, or contacting their elected officials to demand policy changes.
And those different goals would definitely require different tactics, wouldn't they? Like, if they're trying to get people to take action, they'd need strong calls to action within their messaging, right?
Exactly. Like, sign this petition to ban trophy hunting, or donate now to support lion conservation efforts. The clearer that call to action is, the more likely people are to actually take that next step.
Okay, so they've figured out their audience, their message, the channels they'll use. But how do they know if it's actually working? How do they measure success for a campaign like this?
That can be tricky, especially for nonprofits. They could track things like engagement on social media, traffic to their website, the number of petition signatures they get, or the amount of donations that come in. They might even conduct surveys to gauge how public opinion is shifting,
It sounds like a lot of moving pieces to keep track of. But it's really fascinating to see how all these different marketing principles can come together to create a cohesive campaign. Okay, I'm ready to switch gears a bit. Let's talk about that other campaign, the one promoting trophy hunting as a conservation tool. This one feels even more complex to me, to be honest.
It is, definitely, for a few reasons, actually. First off, they're probably going to face an uphill battle when it comes to public perception, Outside of hunting and conservation circles, most people probably don't even know that this argument exists, let alone understand the logic behind it.
Yeah, it's not exactly intuitive, is it? The idea that killing lions can actually help save them.
Not really, no.
So where would they even begin with a campaign like that?
Well, they probably need to focus on education first and foremost. Their initial efforts might be all about explaining the role that trophy hunting can play in conservation. They might argue that regulated hunting actually generates revenue for local communities, and that it provides an economic incentive to protect lion habitats.
I could see them using data and research to support their claims, maybe showcasing examples of successful conservation programs that have been funded by trophy hunting.
Exactly. Their messaging might be more informational in nature, appealing to people's sense of logic and reason rather than just tugging at their heartstrings.
And their target audience would probably be much more niche, right?
I definitely think hunters, conservationists, policymakers, people who are already somewhat familiar with the complexities of wildlife management.
So they wouldn't really be trying to win over the average person scrolling through their social media feed.
Probably not. They might target specialized publications, go to industry events, even engage in lobbying efforts to try and reach those decision makers directly.
Their objective might be more about changing negative perceptions within these specific groups, right?
Yeah, maybe building support for sustainable hunting practices, or even influencing policy decisions related to lion conservation.
Makes sense. And how would they even measure success in a campaign like that? It's not as simple as counting petition signatures or donations.
True. It might involve tracking things like changes in media coverage, how the media is portraying trophy hunting, or shifts in public opinion within those specific target audiences they're focusing on, or even concrete policy outcomes that actually favor their position.
So taking a step back and looking at both sides, it's clear that each campaign faces its own unique set of challenges. The anti-trophy hunting campaign has to deal with people's emotional responses to killing animals, even if there's a logical argument to be made for conservation.
Yeah, that's a big hurdle for them.
And then the pro-trophy hunting campaign has to overcome a lot of negative sentiment and convince people that their approach is actually beneficial.
It's all about building trust and credibility, which is incredibly difficult when you're talking about such a sensitive and controversial topic.
It's really interesting to think about how both sides need to be super careful not to fall into those ethical traps we talked about earlier, like woke washing.
Right, like exploiting a social justice issue for their own gain.
Exactly. They need to make sure that their actions are actually aligning with their message.
It all comes back to authenticity, doesn't it?
It really highlights how marketing, when done right, is about so much more than just selling a product. It's about understanding people, crafting a persuasive message, and ultimately using your platform to make a real impact on the world.
It's about using your power responsibly.
Now, there's this framework mentioned in the research called the For Good framework. It basically encourages marketers to consider things like fairness, openness, respect, really thinking through the ethics of their campaign.
Yeah, it's a great tool for guiding decision-making and ensuring that their approach is ethically sound.
So as we head into the final part of our deep dive, I want to challenge you, our listeners. Put yourself in the shoes of one of these marketers. Choose a side and start brainstorming.
Yeah, think about your target audience, your goals, the tone of your message, the visuals you'd use. Really try to apply everything we've talked about today and see what you come up with.
It's a tough exercise, but a really insightful one.
We can't wait to see what you create.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been getting into these King of Beasts campaigns, seeing how marketing can be used to either support or oppose trophy hunting lions. This case study has been pretty amazing. It really makes you think.
It does. It shows how these marketing principles apply to all sorts of tough issues, ones that get people fired up.
Exactly. And it really highlights the ethical side of things, too, like how do we persuade people without being manipulative or exploitative?
Important stuff to consider, for sure.
So let's get into some specifics about what these campaigns might actually look like. You mentioned storytelling earlier, right? How could each side use that to make your message stick?
Well, imagine the anti-trophy hunting campaign, right? They could tell the story of a specific lion.
Give it a name, a family, really make it personal.
Yeah, exactly. They could talk about how majestic it is, its role in the pride, and then its tragic death at the hands of a trophy hunter.
It would make the issue so much more real, hard not to feel something after hearing a story like that.
Right. And it would tap into those deep-seated emotions that people have about animals, especially majestic ones like lions.
Now, what about the pro-trophy hunting campaign? How could they use storytelling?
They might tell the story of a rural community in Africa struggling to survive.
A community that relies on the money from trophy hunting to fund schools, clinics, maybe even conservation efforts.
Exactly. They could show how this revenue helps real people and how it incentivizes them to protect lions and their habitat.
It's about showing the human side of the issue, right? How conservation can have a positive ripple effect on both people and wildlife.
It's about making those connections for people, helping them see the bigger picture.
Both sides could also lean on research and data, right? Citing studies on lion populations, the effects of habitat loss, the economic impact of trophy hunting, all of that.
Yeah, data can be really persuasive, especially for people who are more logic-driven.
But they'd have to be careful about how they present that data, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
No cherry picking or misleading graphs.
Absolutely. Transparency is key here, especially with a hot-button topic like this. They need to be honest about any limitations in their data and acknowledge that there might be other perspectives out there.
And we can't forget about the impact of visuals, right? Both sides could use powerful images to really grab people's attention.
For sure. The anti-trophy hunting campaign might show images of lions in the wild, majestic and powerful, and then contrast those with graphic photos of trophy kills.
Show the stark reality of it, the beauty and the brutality.
Exactly. And the pro-trophy hunting campaign could show images of thriving lion populations in areas where hunting is managed sustainably.
Maybe even drone footage to show the vastness of the landscape and the challenges of managing wildlife across such a huge area.
Right. But both sides would have to be mindful of not being too sensationalistic.
Yeah, it's about finding that balance, isn't it? Grabbing attention without resorting to shock tactics that could backfire.
It's a fine line to walk for sure.
So as you're putting the finishing touches on those hypothetical campaigns, remember, there's no single right way to do this.
The best campaigns are the ones that are tailored to the specific audience, the goals, and the unique challenges of the issue.
And always, always keep those ethical considerations in mind. Are you being honest? Are you respecting all sides? Are you using your marketing skills for good?
Important questions for any marketer to ask themselves, no matter what they're promoting.
Wow, we've covered so much in this deep dive. Inclusive design, ethical marketing, the power of storytelling. It's been a wild ride.
I hope this has given everyone some new insights and some tools they can actually use.
So next time you see a new product or an ad or a campaign, really take a moment to think about it. What message are they sending? What values are they promoting? What kind of impact are they having on the world?
And remember, as consumers, as citizens, we have a voice. We can demand better from the brands we support.
We can push for more inclusive designs, more ethical marketing, a more just world for everyone.
That's what it's all about.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep pushing for a better future.